Okay guys, this is Frank and I'm doing an update on the Black Star object, Fiery Messenger or Second Sun, whatever you want to call it. Today is June 22nd, 2014, and the reason why I'm doing this update is because there is quite some confusion about the current lull period on the planet. There's not so much seismic activity as we had in April or May and March. And I wanted to get the picture clear myself, so this is why I'm doing the update. And I think I know the reason why this is happening, and I'll show that to you. This is an article that I wrote in January this year. It's about the Fiery Messenger, that's what I prefer to call it. And if I go down, you can see how I started the investigation. It started when I did some research on earthquakes, and I noticed that between 1700 and 1952, there were only 3 magnitude 9 earthquakes, and they all occurred with Uranus in approximately the same area in the sky. And I thought this is not a coincidence, and so I dug into that a little, and then I went into the history of Planet X, which goes back all the way to the 19th century. You can read it all here. This is the entire history. The interesting thing here is that astronomers in the early 80s actually confirmed what Uranus already indicated, which is an object on the western part of the constellation Orion, which is here. You can see this on the picture. This is the western part of Orion, and here's Uranus during those large earthquakes between 1700 and 1952. So this was actually the first confirmation for me. And then I found, here's the plane of the ecliptic, which means that the object is coming from the south and then slowly going upward into the inner solar system. There's actually a picture of this object, and here it is. You may wonder if this is the real object. I think it is. It was found by some guy on YouTube. He has the coordinates on the western part of Orion, and Google Sky. This picture was taken between 2000 and 2005, and Google Sky at the same coordinates is showing something completely different. It has masked the object completely, and I zoomed in, and I had some difficulty doing that. But if you don't zoom in and you just get your coordinates, you just see this as background stars or whatever. So you don't see it. It goes unnoticed. But if you zoom in and you know what to look for, namely this object. I mean, if you look at the stars here around it, they are at exactly the same position. So this has brightened up a little bit. The stars look brighter, but they certainly completely mask the object here, and they did that for a reason. And the blacked out box in Google Sky somewhere else near the western part of Orion is just a decoy. That's not at all interesting. This is what it's really about. And well, you can read this article for yourself, The Trail of Earthquakes with all the constellations. That's not what I want to do now. It's about the western part of Orion. It's about this object coming from the south. Why am I showing this to you? Well, what I noticed, if I go to EMSC here, and I wanted to know when exactly magnitude 8 earthquakes occurred during the last 10 years. Well, between October 4, I think in October it's where the database from EMSC started, to today, this time period, magnitude 8 earthquakes, I entered it here, and the events, there are only 13 of them. What's interesting about these earthquakes is that they all occurred somewhere between September and May. You don't see any of these earthquakes during the months June, July, and August, and there must be a reason for it. There has to be. So I wanted to find out if that also fits the the theory, or well, the pieces of the puzzle that I had so far that you can read here in this article. And in order to find that out, we have to go to Solar System Scope, and there it is. This is today, and let's see. What I want to do here is I want to line up the sun with Orion. Orion, that's here. This is Orion. Here you can see it. This is the constellation Orion, and I want to line that up here. So like this. So the sun is actually in the middle of Orion, like that. This here is the western part of Orion. Now, why is that interesting? Like I said, what you see here, especially during the last 4 years, magnitude 8 plus earthquakes occurred February, March, April, May, April. So between February and May. This is the area of Earth's orbit that we should take a look at. Now let's do that here. Here's the Earth, and I draw it back to February. Here, this is the beginning of February. Maybe January as well, but here's February, early February, and then all the way up to May. You see what's happening? You see what's going on here? You see that? This is exactly the area where the Earth in its orbit around the Sun goes through the imaginary line drawn through the object coming from the south, from the western part of Orion. This is the western part of Orion area where the Earth goes through during this time period. So during February, you see that? This is February here. Around here it starts. Here's where it starts. And these were the coordinates where Uranus was during those large earthquakes in 250 years time. It was in this area. It's also in the western part of Orion. Can I get Earth? Yes, here it is. So, and this year in April, that's where it started. This was the highlight of activity around this area here. And if we look at this here from this side, you see that this is seen from the opposite side with the Earth in the Virgo constellation, the Saturn there in Libra constellation. I don't think Saturn deserves to be followed any longer, because I don't think that Saturn is a catalyst anymore. I believe this is the case because I can't find any pattern anymore, any pattern that we can recognize and that we can follow. There's confusion because I expected large earthquakes in the month of May. Instead, they occurred in April. And I believe the only explanation, we had 8 magnitude 7 plus earthquakes, 8 of them in 19 days, in the first 19 days of April. Under normal circumstances, that's a yearly average. You know what I mean? This is insane. 8 magnitude 7 plus earthquakes. We had April 1, we had the magnitude 8 earthquake in Chile, and then followed by 7 magnitude 7 plus earthquakes until April 19. And then throughout the month of May, we also had quite some magnitude 6 earthquakes, and then also that went down after May the 20th or so, which is here. And here you can see the Earth is really going outside the area of influence on the western part of Orion. You see what I mean? So if I put the Sun back, I line it up again with Orion here, and we draw the Earth further in its orbit. The question is, when will things become interesting again? Well, that depends a little. We don't know exactly where the object is. This area, this is very important to understand. This area here is a lull period area. And this is because the Sun is actually shielding the Earth from the black star influence. That's what's happening here. You see? There are, in this area, in June, this is early June, July, and August, we haven't had any large earthquakes, magnitude 8 plus earthquakes, during the last 10 years, at least. And if you go further back in time, the largest earthquakes, starting in 1900 anyway, also did not occur during this time period here, June, July, August. They never did. It was January, or it was May, or it was March, or it was December, but never in this area. This is because the sun is shielding the Earth, in my opinion anyway. So then when the Earth comes around, and then things become interesting again. So here it starts again. So early September, half September, in that area somewhere there. Things, because the sun is no longer shielding